Let's dive into some seriously heavy stuff today. Plato's Meno and Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics. So
Yeah, those are some pretty
big questions, rather.
big questions, right? Yeah, it's wild how texts written literally thousands of years ago can still resonate with us now. They grapple with this whole concept of the good life, or as the Greeks put it, eudaimonia, which is about way more than just like fleeting happiness. It's like a deeper sense of flourishing, living in sync with your true purpose, all that good stuff.
Okay, so where do we even begin to unpack all of that in today's world? I mean, where's the starting point?
Well, I think a good place to kick things off is with Socrates. He's like the main character in all those Plato dialogues, and the way he questions everything really gets to the core of how we approach knowledge and wisdom. That famous story about the oracle at Delphi. It turns out that even Socrates, who was considered the wisest dude in Greece, knew that it was important to admit when he didn't know something. That's a powerful lesson for us, too. To really grow, we got to embrace the fact that we don't have all the answers.
That's so true. It's almost like admitting you don't know everything is the first step to actually learning something new.
You got it. And this idea of being humble intellectually, I mean, is super important when we're talking about virtue and living a good life. It's about being open to new ideas and challenging what we think we know and just realizing that there's always something more to learn.
Which brings us to Plato's Meno, right? Where Socrates tackles this big question, can virtue actually be taught?
Exactly. If virtue is like the key to living a good life, then how do we get it? Are we born with it, or is it something we pick up along the way?
So it's like that whole nature versus nurture debate, but for morals.
Exactly. And in the Milano, Socrates uses this really clever analogy to explore that question. He guides a slave boy who's got zero background in geometry through a series of questions, and the kid ends up discovering these geometrical principles all on his own.
Oh, wow. So it's like Socrates believed this knowledge was already in the boy, just waiting to be brought out.
That's one way to see it. Socrates called it recollection, this idea that we're born with certain knowledge, and through asking the right questions and having conversations, we can bring it to the surface.
So maybe virtue's like that too. Maybe it's not about starting from scratch, but about uncovering and developing something that's already inside of us.
That is a super interesting question, and it transitions perfectly to Aristotle, who was actually a student of Plato. He takes those ideas about virtue and living a good life and turns them into something really practical.
So less about uncovering innate knowledge and more about actually taking action.
Exactly. For Aristotle, living a good life and achieving eudaimonia is all about developing virtues. Those
Hmm.
are like excellent qualities that help us thrive as human beings. But he didn't think we were born with these virtues fully formed. He really emphasized the importance of forming good habits and developing character.
So you're saying it's all about building good habits that lead to a virtuous life. I'm all ears. Tell me more.
He believed that being virtuous means finding the golden mean, hitting that sweet spot between going too far and not doing enough. Imagine you're thinking about your work week and you're trying to apply Aristotle's golden mean. Instead of burning yourself out by working 80 hours or being a slacker and only doing 20 hours a week, you got to find that middle ground where you're hitting your goals and also taking care of yourself.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not about being fearless, but about finding that balance point between being reckless and being a total chicken.
You nailed it. And that idea applies to all kinds of virtues. Think about generosity. It's all about finding that balance between throwing money around and being a total Scrooge. Or honesty. It's like finding that sweet spot between being brutally honest and sugarcoating everything.
So finding that perfect balance, that golden mean, is like the secret sauce to cultivating virtue and living a good life.
That's what Aristotle's arguing, and it's incredibly relevant to everything we're dealing with in the modern world. But how exactly do we apply this ancient wisdom to our lives in the 21st century? That's something we'll get into after the break. Welcome back. We were just getting into Aristotle's golden mean,
Yeah.
finding that balance in our life.
Yeah. And we were using work-life balance as an example, finding that spot between burning out and not being productive enough.
Yeah.
But how do we apply that to other things in life? Like, what would Aristotle say about navigating the digital world?
It's interesting to think how these ancient philosophers would approach the stuff we deal with today. Let's take social media as an example. How do you apply the golden mean to something that's so
Yeah,
complex?
that's a good point. It feels like social media pushes everyone to extremes. Like
Mm.
you're either constantly showing off or you're constantly comparing yourself and feeling like you're missing out. Where's the middle ground there?
Well, remember that Aristotle was all about building habits that lead to eudaimonia, that deeper feeling of fulfillment. So instead of thinking about social media use as good or bad, let's think about what habits might lead to a more satisfying digital life.
I like that. So instead of getting stuck in those extremes, we should be focusing on developing habits that promote well-being.
Exactly. What if instead of endlessly scrolling, you decided to set some boundaries around your social media time? Or what if instead of trying to create this perfect online persona, you used it to actually connect people you care about or learn new things?
Those are really good ideas.
Mm,
It's like choosing to use social media with intention instead of letting it control you.
That's the idea. It's about being aware of how these platforms are affecting our lives and making conscious choices about how we interact with them.
Okay, so that's social media. What about work-life balance? It seems like everybody struggles to find that sweet spot.
You're totally right. And Aristotle's philosophy of habit and balance can definitely help us out here. Remember, he believed that both work and leisure are crucial for a fulfilling life.
So it's not about trying to get rid of either work or leisure completely.
Not at all. Work gives us a sense of purpose and accomplishment, and it lets us support ourselves. And leisure lets us relax, recharge, connect with loved ones, and chase our passions.
But finding that right balance between the two can be super hard. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle and forget to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's where developing good habits comes in. Imagine setting clear boundaries between work time and personal time, actually being present in each moment and making time for things that bring you joy and help you unwind.
That sounds amazing. So it's not just about how many hours you're working or relaxing, but about how you're actually experiencing those hours.
Exactly. And this takes a good deal of self-awareness. We need to be honest with ourselves about what we truly need to thrive, both at work and in our personal lives.
So if I'm feeling burned out, maybe that's a sign that I need to take a look at my work-life balance and switch things up.
That's the idea. And those changes might look different for everyone. The key is to pay attention to how you're feeling and to make choices that match your values and goals.
This is making me think about all the areas of life where I could be using this whole golden mean idea. Like from how I manage my time to how I handle relationships, it's all about finding balance, isn't it?
You're getting it. That's the beautiful thing about philosophy. It gives us these timeless tools to deal with all the complicated stuff in life. But these tools are only helpful if we're willing to actually use them.
So the next step is taking all this incredible wisdom and putting it into practice, right?
Exactly. How do we connect ancient wisdom with modern life? That's what we'll be digging into in the last part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've been on this journey with Plato and Aristotle, right? Exploring all these ideas about virtue and the good life and finding that balance. But how do we actually take this ancient wisdom and make it work for us, like right now in our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's a question that both Plato and Aristotle would want us to wrestle with. They believe that examining our lives, like really looking at our habits, our choices, our values, that's essential to living a good life. It's not enough to just understand these concepts. We have to actually live them.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we go from reading about virtue to actually being virtuous people?
Well, Aristotle was all about habits. He'd probably say we need to build structures and routines into our lives that support our efforts to be more virtuous.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What would that look like in practice? Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's take honesty. Aristotle saw honesty as the golden mean between being brutally blunt and being a phony flatterer. So how do we turn honesty from a concept into a habit?
I guess we could start by looking at how we communicate. Do we exaggerate a lot or tell little white lies just to avoid tough conversations?
You got it. Noticing those patterns is the first step. Then we can start making small changes. Maybe we practice being more direct and truthful even when it feels a little awkward. Or maybe we push ourselves to speak our minds authentically even if our opinions are different from everyone else's.
So it's all about strengthening that honesty muscle by practicing it in every interaction.
That's it. And that same idea applies to other virtues too. Think about generosity. If you want to cultivate that, maybe start by volunteering a few hours each week, or maybe donate regularly to a cause that's important to you. Little actions done consistently over time can make a huge difference.
What about patience? That always feels like a tough one in our world where everything moves so fast.
You're telling me. And Aristotle would remind us that patience is a practice, just like any other virtue. It's about managing our reactions, especially when things are difficult. We can start by noticing those times when we're about to lose it, like when we're stuck in traffic or dealing with something super frustrating.
Oh man, I know exactly what you mean. My patience definitely gets tested when I'm stuck in rush hour.
We've all been there, but instead of letting those moments get the best of us, what if we tried taking a deep breath and seeing things from the other person's point of view? What if we chose to react in a calmer way? It's all about realizing that we always have a choice in how we respond.
That's so true. We're not just at the mercy of our circumstances. We actually have the power to shape our character through the choices we make every single day.
Exactly. It's those small, everyday choices that really matter, the ones that align our actions with our values. They're gradually shaping who we are becoming. Aristotle knew that becoming a virtuous person isn't a quick fix, it's a lifelong journey.
This is really helping me to see these big abstract virtues in a whole new light. It's like we can break them down into smaller, more concrete actions that we can actually practice in our lives.
That's the key. It's about making virtue a part of our daily experience, not some far off ideal that we can never actually reach.
So instead of trying to be perfect, maybe we should just focus on making progress, taking small steps and getting a little bit better every day.
Exactly. Remember, Plato and Aristotle both believed that pursuing the good life is a journey. It's not about reaching a destination. It's about constantly pushing ourselves to grow and become better versions of ourselves, making our lives more and more aligned with what we believe is true and good.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have so many new tools to think about how to live a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
That's great to hear. And before we go, I'll leave you with one last thought. Both Plato and Aristotle believe that knowing yourself is the foundation of living a virtuous life. So what if you set aside just 15 minutes every day to think about your values, your choices, and what you're aiming for in life? Could that simple act of self-reflection be the key to unlocking your own personal eudaimonia?